Hello and welcome to The Ring, Euronews' weekly debate show broadcasting from the European Parliament here in Brussels. I'm Stefan Grobe. On The Ring, members of the European Parliament go face-to-face on some of the biggest issues facing the EU. Today, we want to talk about the heatwave that is baking Europe and that raises some fundamental questions about the way we're dealing with climate change. Luis Albertos has more.
Europe is the fastest warming continent on Earth, heating up at roughly twice the global average rate. As temperatures continue to rise, a critical question emerges. Is Europe prepared for a hotter future? The challenge goes far beyond climate policy. Cities are struggling to deal with extreme heat. Energy systems are facing growing pressure, and governments are being forced to find new ways of protecting society's most vulnerable. The debate is also increasingly ideological. Broader questions are being raised about consumption, health and sustainability. Should we forget climate change for a moment and just stay in our own air-conditioned homes, if we have one? Or is it time for drastic action to be taken to mitigate the worst effects of climate change? Difficult choices lie ahead.
Well, a lot to unpack for our debaters, and here they are.
Benedetta Scuderi, an Italian MEP from the Greens. She's a member of the Committees on Industry, Research and Energy, and Women's Rights and Gender Equality. Regarding the climate crisis, she says, "In Europe, we are witnessing a climate collapse and its most dramatic effects, such as uninhabitable homes, power cuts and blocked transport systems, but the right continues to deny climate change and to slow down the transition. This is not pragmatism, but a choice that is destroying us." Andrea Wechsler, a German MEP from the centre-right European People's Party. She's a member of the Committees on the Environment, Climate and Food Safety, and on Industry, Research and Energy. She says targets and goals alone will not protect people, infrastructure or nature. The real question is how we deliver. We can lose ourselves in ideology, conditionalities and regulatory micromanagement, or we can move from debate to delivery, technology open, market open and innovation open.
So let me welcome to The Ring Benedetta Scuderi and Andrea Wechsler. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Both of you, and great to have you here. Now, the aim of The Ring is to offer our viewers a glimpse at European Parliament debates, so you should feel right at home. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Let's start. Europe is once again facing record-breaking temperatures, wildfires and droughts. Is Europe ready for this? Is it prepared, or is this simply the new normal? Andrea, I'm going to start with you.
Well, first of all, let me say that we have had 150 million people affected by the heat wave over the last couple of weeks, and we lost 1,300 people. And I think this loss shows us we are not yet prepared. We are doing everything now which is in our hands to find these issues at a European level, but no, we are not at where we need to be to protect people in Europe.
Why are we not prepared? This is not the first time we had a heat wave. We had, extreme weather in the summer.
It's not just the summer, because we have extreme weather in the summer, we have extreme weather in the autumn. I want to remember Valencia, I want to remember the flooding also in Italy. We have extreme weather also in the winter. This is a pattern, it's a climate pattern. And we're not prepared because there's a lot of people in this parliament and in many institutions that still think that climate change is not an issue. And if we do not respond to this extreme condition in a systemic way, we will never be prepared. If we think that is one or the other emergency, now is the heat and then is the flooding and then is at the extreme conditions, we will not be prepared if we don't put money, we don't give systemic solution, and we don't understand that the issue is the climate collapse. If we still keep listening to who is saying that this is not a problem and if we have time, then we will never be prepared and the conditions are going to be worse and worse.
Who is to blame for this? If every year, every summer, we're kind of taken off guard by the heat wave with the consequences that you've described, who is to blame for this?
Well, scientific evidence is clear. We do have climate change and it's induced by human behavior. It's CO2 emissions that is partially responsible for the climate change that we have. And we now have pulled the right policy levers on a European level to tackle the clear signals that we have how we need to address climate change. So there is not this one person to blame, but what we're doing now is take responsibility in the face of scientific evidence to tackle climate change in Europe and to lead to decarbonization.
Well, it's maybe not one person, but is there one institution? Are there national governments? Is it a commission? All of them?
We cannot blame one institution. It's a systemic problem. We can blame the multinational, like 57 of them are like the most polluted, the biggest polluter, and we are doing nothing about it. We can blame our governments because they're still not adapting as fast. We can blame the European Parliament also when they decide to do step backwards on the climate laws, on climate regulation, climate-related regulation. I want to remember the deforestation, for example, the deforestation law that we had a lot of steps back, and this is one of the first steps that we need to actually take to respond to the climate crisis. Is the Parliament also to blame, and not just the Parliament, the Council and the Commission when they want to definance climate adaptation. In the new MFF proposals, there is basically no money for climate adaptation, and we see the situation we are now. And we also need to blame internationally people like Trump that decided to not even go to COP and to get out of the climate negotiations. This is extremely dangerous.
So a weakening climate policy, many people believe that your party is sort of part of the problem, not part of the solution when it comes to climate policy. How do you respond?
No, we're clearly part of the solution. We're not part of the problem. We clearly recognize that there is a climate issue and we're tackling the climate issue. But what we are not doing is rolling back on climate legislation. On the contrary, what we are doing is to accelerate the implementation of the climate legislation that we've taken and that we've put into place in the European Union, which is the most ambitious continent. And this has been done under Ursula von der Leyen. The Green Deal is EPP policy, and we are now trying to combine the Clean Industrial Deal with the Green Deal, which means like make it work now, but with technology openness and not with bureaucracy. If you take the deforestation legislation, that is not leading us to the effect that it's meant to have with the bureaucracy that comes with this. And this is what we're doing. This is not deregulation.
Benedetta, do you agree?
Absolutely not. I am sorry, but the EPP is big part of the problem. The EPP in this mandate is deciding deliberately to side with the far right on many legislation, and one of the two main topics is climate and environment. Deforestation is not bureaucracy. Like fighting deforestation globally, that was the intent of the regulation, is the main aim that we have, is the main mean that we have to actually fight and stop the climate change. I mean, if we keep thinking that we're not giving answer and aligning with the far right and destroying the Green Deal, because there's many pieces of the Green Deal that have been destroyed by the EPP in this moment, without giving a direction to Europe, this is making us more vulnerable.
Okay. How do you think about air conditioning?
Air conditioning, I think at some point it becomes necessary, but we also need to make our housing and our buildings more efficient. And this is another thing that I will really have the EPP on board to not destroy the building efficiency directive, for example. I think also that this is a social justice issue, because air conditioning is only available for the richest part of the population. It's not available for the part of the population that is more vulnerable. And we need to provide to everyone the possibility of refreshment.
Andrea, what is your position on air conditioning? I mean,
well, first of all, let me be very clear. We are neither destroying the Clean Deal. We've made a clear commitment for the 2040 climate targets, nor are we destroying climate legislation. On the contrary, we're trying to make it work by accelerating the implementation of the climate legislation and by being clearly committed to the climate goals of the European Union. What about air conditioning?
Yeah,
oh, that's
big
part
debate
of the,
right now in Europe.
Well, it's clearly to me one very important part in terms of an electrification strategy. We need a cooling strategy for people. We've had people, the elderly, the vulnerable, the children in schools that were impossible to survive or even to have schooling. Yes, air conditioning is one of the pillars and the solutions for the people. It's electrified. This is the way the European Union is going forward. It will be one part of climate adaptation. But this will not be enough. And that is why we're working on the implementation of the
Benedetta
climate
mentioned
targets.
the sort of the social inequality when it comes to access to that technology. Do you think she has a point?
Well, there clearly is one, and that's why it's so important that the Commission now comes up with a cooling strategy where we clearly need a targeted strategy that we protect the vulnerables first. And that is the elderly, that is hospitals, that is schools. And then it goes to private homes. And yes, this is our task to make climate protection for the vulnerable.
How can we implement such an idea? I mean, the schools, hospitals, etc. Many hospitals and schools have air conditioning. Hospitals certainly more than schools.
Not in all member states.
Yeah.
The point is, and again, I would like to take on board the EPP on this, we need funding. And this Commission is not putting funding on this. We've been asking since the start of the mandate some funding for building renovation. We have a building renovation directive which we really want to keep, but that is again a social justice issue, because if we don't have the funding, also only the people that can afford the renovation will have efficient housing. And instead, we want especially the people that cannot afford the renovation, the public administration, the schools, especially in countries and regions that are in more danger, to be able to afford renovation. And this Commission is not putting money on it. The Parliament is also not agreeing on this, because we, for example, in the European Competitiveness Fund are asking for a part of the money to go into building renovation. We've been asking it in the MFF. We are asking it in all the places. If you don't put the money, you can do all the cooling strategy you want.
Should it be a European thing here, or should it be left to the national governments because they're closer to the situation?
Well, first of all, European money is endless. And we need to be very clear about where we put the money for the next couple of years. And yes, it would be a great wish list to have air conditioning for schools on the MFF wish list. But this will not realistically work, because we will not be able to fund European air conditioning in the breadth as we need it. So our avenue in the EPP is clearly to fund innovative technologies, to make the technology cheaper, and to work on the lowering of energy prices in order to make the operation cheaper. So energy prices down, technology cheaper, and this is going to make it more accessible. And just on a side note, in Germany, air conditioning is considered to be a heat pump, and so you can actually get subsidies by the German state. So I think given the limitations of the budget on the European level, we should not put it into subsidies for air conditioning, but into innovative technologies on the one hand side and lowering energy prices on the other hand side.
Let me just step in here. As we're just getting warmed up, that is no pun intended, we are ready for the next round. Now it's time for you to challenge each other directly, just as you do in the hemicycle behind us. So, Benedetta, this round starts with you.
Yes, so my colleague has talked about the difficulties that many workers on the workplace have experienced in this heat wave. So I want to ask you if you will be available to support a call for a directive for the European Commission to protect workers, especially the most vulnerable ones, from heat waves. That means more breaks, that means understanding which are the temperature, that means changing the shift. We need a legally binding directive, and we need the EPP on board, because we can say we want to protect European people.
That's a long question.
First of all, let me be very clear. We need to protect workers, and we need to use the flexibilities in the law to protect them in place. There is already a big body of law for the protections of workers in place. So before we call for a new directive, our EPP approach clearly is, let's make an impact assessment of what directives do we have, what national legislation do we have, and how does it fit together? Because what we do not want to have is yet a call for a new directive in elements which are already largely regulated on a European level, and allow the member states for flexibilities. We have northern states where you have more protection for cold weather probably, and then heat waves where we have other member states. So let's keep the flexibility, clearly commitment to protect workers, but let's not do another directive without having evaluated what the current legislation already does.
All right, now your question to Benedetta.
Well, let me talk about technology openness, Madame Scuderi. If we want to really convincingly decarbonize, we need to be open not only for electrons, and clearly electrification will be the main pathway for decarbonizing, but also for molecules. And what I see the Greens going for is that they do not treat all technologies that we need for decarbonization equally. Take CCUS, take low-carbon hydrogen, take synthetic fuels. This is something we don't get your party on board. How will you approach renewable energies that comes from molecules?
So first we need to understand what is renewable and what is not renewable. Then we need to understand what is sustainable and what is not sustainable. That mostly, I think this is a way from a certain part of this parliament, and not just this parliament, but politics, to hide the fact that we want to keep fossil fuel in. Because CCT, it's a good technology, but only if you use it in a very, very hardly decarbonizing sectors. Instead, the People Party wants to use it in things like electricity production. And we have renewable energies for that. We don't need CCT. And this has been actually approved by the Parliament in the project of common interest. And for us, it's absolutely impossible to sustain something like that because it's economically absolutely non-efficient, cost-efficient, and it's also dangerous for the environment. Low-carbon hydrogen is a very costly technology, and we saw it because we had a hydrogen program, and that was not flying because it's just not economically efficient, and instead other technologies could be. And also low-carbon hydrogen is made with gas if you intend blue hydrogen, which is absolutely doesn't make sense because gas is very costly, hydrogen is very costly, and is still keeping the fossil fuel in. So what will happen is that we will not have low-carbon hydrogen, we will have gas inside the energy mix, and this is a strategy of the fossil lobby to have fossil fuel in the energy mix forever. We actually want to get out of that. So if we have technologies that are doing this, are cost-efficient and are scalable, the Greens are all open.
All right, we've heard the views from our guests. Now it's time to bring in a new voice. I would like to bring in Simon Steele, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. In a statement released last week, he said this: "Until humanity stops burning colossal amounts of coal, oil and gas, extreme heat will keep getting worse, and other climate impacts from mega droughts, floods, wildfires and storms will keep hammering every economy and population harder each year." He certainly has a point here, but how realistic is it that we get off fossil fuel immediately in the European Union?
First of all, he's right. Burning fossil fuels cannot be the way to the future because we know the impacts and we felt it in the heat wave. The question is how fast can we work on the transformation and what decarbonization levers do we have? So first of all, the strategy in the European Union is clear. Let's get independent from fossil fuels imports. Let's try to electrify in order to get the fossils out of our system, which is also a major issue in terms of resilience. And then there will be hard to abate sectors where we have to work on alternatives. We talked about hydrogen, which will be one of the important pathways to go forward. But there will be some sectors where we need fossil fuels also as a base sort of material in the chemicals industry, and we have to be open to use it at least in those processes where we cannot substitute it. But clearly the majority of the policies targeted are towards defossilization.
Benedetta, even if Europe acted tonight, right, or tomorrow, we cannot save the world alone, the planet alone. Now, global climate policy is under pressure, if not under attack. You mentioned Trump earlier. How can we get the international community sort of back on track towards a common climate policy?
Well, first of all, we need to keep our own goals and to not water them down. And again, like the climate law, we're very happy that we have a climate law that is setting a target for 2040. But again, because of the EPP lining with the far right, we couldn't have a very clear target, and we have it watered down. How can we expect to convince the rest of the world to have good targets, good policies, if we are the first that are doing step backwards? Second, we need to be clear on what we are financing. And again, I mean, I understand that we say that we want to phase out fossil fuel, but then if in the negotiation, if in the files, we don't say that no European money are going into technologies that are financing fossils, and that all the MFF is actually going to phase out fossil fuel as an aim. Of course, it's not happening in the next 7 years, but that needs to be the aim also of the MFF.
I want to ask,
then we are not going into the right direction.
Okay, Andrea, the EPP has been mentioned again.
No, I mean, we are not watering.
Is that cooperation with the far right coming to haunt you?
No, it's absolutely, we are clearly standing by the climate goals. We fixed 2040, and yes, we have an offset to 85%, because this is also reaching out into other countries and to allow for quick wins. We can do it perfectly here in the European Union with 90% in Europe, and this will be very hard to achieve, and it's better to have the 90% with an offset in other countries, Article 6 in the Paris Agreement, which allows for it. It's foreseen in the international community. I think this is a very pragmatic way forward with still reaching the 90%, but giving flexibilities to achieve it.
Okay. Are you happy with this answer?
Absolutely not. We can do both, and we should do both.
All right. Let's take a break here on The Ring. We'll be back with more after this. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Ring, Euronews' weekly debate show. I'm Stefan Grobe, and I'm joined by Benedetta Scuderi from the Greens from Italy and Andrea Wechsler from the European People's Party from Germany. Today, our topic is the sweltering heat that Europeans are suffering from right now. One aspect is the heat in our big cities. European cities can be up 10 degrees hotter at night than surrounding rural areas during heat waves. In Paris, for instance, nights are typically 4 degrees warmer than nearby countrysides. In Madrid and Rome, heat waves show 10 to 15 degrees surface temperature gaps between city and rural areas. Even Brussels, Amsterdam, Berlin now see more tropical nights and stronger nighttime heat. Should cities be legally required to provide more green spaces?
So I think the problem with Europe that has been the last mandate is that we had a lot of legal requirements, but we had no financial support with it. And this is extremely unfair. What is happening now in the next MFF is also that cohesion funds are going down. So that means that cities in the most vulnerable regions are actually going to suffer over cuts of funds. How we can make a legal requirement to a city that is already extremely underfunded? We have a requirement from Europe, and then we say, but then you see how to do it. Then European citizens aren't going to hate us. We need to do both. We need to do regulation, we need to accompany people and cities to do this, and we need to give the right financial provisions.
See, and there I'm different. I say, no, we do not need legal regulation, because this is something that the municipalities, the nation states, in terms of subsidiarity, can deal with on local level. And they need to see what is possible to fund, where do the funds come from. And at the same time, every region, every city is different. We have very different elements in the city, so let them do their job on the ground. They do a fantastic job.
That's an interesting question. Is it becoming a question of inequality?
Absolutely. And this is a cohesion matter, because it's inequality within Europe. That's why, of course, we don't need a very strong regulation, but we can have regulation of consumption of soil. That, for example, we propose, and again, the EPP has watered down, saying, like, no, let's not put it binding. So we still have a very high rate of consumption of soil, and Europe has done nothing about it. While we know that consumption of soil is very bad for heat waves and flooding, that doesn't mean that we need to say to the city how to do it, but we can say, okay, now we need to reduce the consumption of soil, and now we need to remake green some areas, and we can provide you with the financial support. That means more own resources. That means also maybe taxing the richest part of the population that's becoming richer and richer, and maybe doing some public debt as well, common debt.
Thank you so far. And now it's time to move on to our fifth and final round. And here we want to do something different. I'm going to ask you a set of questions, and you can only answer with yes or no. Okay? Andrea, I start with you. Simple question. Is Europe winning the fight against climate change?
Yes, they're on their way.
Uh-huh. Benedetta?
No.
No. All right. Should new homes be legally required to withstand extreme heat?
No, it's not another mandatory requirement. We go for decarbonization, and this is one of the main levers for housing.
Okay.
They already are for European directive, so I hope this answer doesn't mean that EPP wants to backtrack us on that.
Okay. Has climate policy become too ideological?
Yes.
Yeah, from the far right, because they are attacking it without knowing it.
Okay. And one more, is there anything that you have heard over the past half hour from your opponent that you agree with?
A lot of things, actually. We all agree that we need to fasten up on climate prevention, adaptation, mitigation, that we need to provide the correct funding. I think we have a different view on regulation, on the role of Europe and the role of European budget. But there's other things that at least me and Andrea agree. I'm not sure the whole group of Andrea would agree.
Andrea.
Well, I think in the targets we're absolutely aligned, and it's a question of how we implement it. Even in the small targets about air conditioning, I think there is a strong alignment. So let's make this work.
There's always the argument that when it comes to climate policy, that says politicians haven't brought the public on board.
Yeah.
Is that something you agree with?
I absolutely agree with that, because there's been a lot of targets, and I said this before, that was the problem on our last mandate. There were a lot of targets that I really agree with, but there was not enough guidelines guiding and funding to actually achieve those targets. So if you say to someone, this is it, now you need to renovate your house, you need to buy an electric car, you need to do this, they will not be able to do it. But instead, if you say, okay, like let's say to the member states that they need to renovate all the public housing that are inefficient, and we give them part of the money and they need to find the other part of the money, then the part of the population that is in the most difficulties will have a better house, the targets will be met, and actually the most inefficient building park will be renovated. If we did something like this, we would have the people on board. If we just say
that's the very different approach from us. Like, we would not put it down from Brussels on the people and give them funding for it, but we want people bottom up to have a business case, to understand that if they install a heat pump, this is going to be beneficial and economically for the environment. Let them be part of the solution, and not paternalistically from the top, from Brussels, bring it down to the people and give them funding.
Have you ever been to the south of Europe, to the Eastern Europe?
Oh, yes.
Do you see,
I lived in Italy for 2 years.
Do you see the condition of some people living there? Do you think they can afford to put a heat pump? And that would be the first thought.
Energy prices in Italy are one of the highest.
Energy prices. I know, but this is not the case. But the problem is that in some places of our continent, and not just in some regions, but like in the suburbs and where the most vulnerable people live, people cannot afford to put a heat pump. So we're going to be like, oh, we give you a business case and you do it. They cannot afford to pay the rent. They cannot afford to pay the food. And we want to give them a business case? No, we need to give support. We need to give financing. And we need to want a Europe as a once. So there's no differences. Instead, if we say, you do it on a local level, we will just increase inequalities and differences.
Does she have a point here?
No, well, I do see the point which she's trying to make, but eventually it will not work if you paternalistically make, you're now forcing the people into transformation, even though they are in vulnerable areas, even though there is energy poverty, and is taking them on board and having investments being made in those local communities is massively better. And if you talk about Italy, it's one of the most fossil fuel dependent energy systems. That's why here we have to change, and then electricity prices go down, and then you do have a business model.
All right. I think we cannot solve the problem today, but thank you so much for a very interesting conversation. Then this brings us to the end of this edition of The Ring. Thanks again to Benedetta Scuderi and Andrea Wechsler. Thanks to our audience at home. If you like, you can continue the conversation by sending us your comments to thering@euronews.com. That's it for today. I'm Stefan Grober. Take care and see you soon on Euronews.